Hi everyone, James Martin here. Wanted to go over a little bit of my approach to drawing. I want to thank you all for your purchase of Muse. I'm very excited about the book, and I wanted to do a little sketch to talk about some of the concepts I cover a little bit in the book and process, but I think seeing it is helpful. Usually I start with the head. I know there's different approaches. When I started with Hogarth, he started with the torso, and I think it's very valid. Gives you maybe a better sense of action, but I like starting with the head because it gives me a better sense of proportion, and I have a kind of a good idea of how many head heights a figure is, and it's a good entry point. Just got to make sure they get the angle of the neck correct, because it's going to be the start of your longest line or your line of action. So here I am putting in the shoulders. I usually go from head, neck, shoulders, and now I'm putting in what you'll see is like a trapezoidal shape from the side of the armpits to the crotch, and then from the neck to the external oblique or the hips. This gives like a little trapezoid, and Fred Fixler taught this, and it's a quick way of visualizing the torso. And it's very helpful, especially in front-facing views and back-facing views. Side views, not so much. Now I'm putting what I call a mass conception for the rib cage. That's a simplified symbol, as it were, for the geometry, underlying geometry. It helps me get my widths correct and start thinking in a three-dimensional manner. What I'm doing right now is a 2D schematic. I'm kind of solving the silhouette, as it were. And I'm going to work from the outside into the interior of the body as the drawing progresses. Right now I'm kind of correcting the top plane of the head. The top plane of the head is usually an important landmark, because 90 degrees to that is the front plane of the head, and that's the tilt of the head. So you got to get those two angles correct, or the tilt of the head will be off. So now putting in some smaller forms now of the breasts. Remember, these are symmetrical items on the or anatomical objects in the body. So eyes, breasts, hips. One side's got to relate to the other. So I'm constantly thinking across the body. You saw I did one armpit there. Now I'm looking for the other armpit. Right now I'm doing line 1 and line 2 of the arm. Line 1 of a limb or torso is the gesture or the direction, and line 2 is the thickness and the type of person you're drawing: thick, thin, muscular, etc. Line 1 and line 2 always follow each other in their convexity or concavity at the beginning, and then I lay the detail on top of these simplified line 1 and line 2s of the form. When I talk about line 1 and line 2, I was taught there's really just three lines you can make, or three marks you can make, and everything's an iteration of them thereof. You have your C curves, you have your S curves, and you have straights. You'll find your straights closer to the bones or the joints, and of course S curves and C curves all throughout the figure. Right now I'm doing line 1 of her leg here. This is Erin, my favorite models. And now I'm doing line 2. Again, they follow each other in their convexity or concavity. Sometimes I'll make a little bit of I'll jump ahead and put a concavity on line 1 or line 2, or a convexity, but when I'm teaching I try to keep it very simple and follow a line 1 and line 2. Here comes line 2 on that gastrocnemius all the way down to the ankle. Again, I'm thinking in as long as lines as possible. You draw through, past, and beyond when you're drawing. You don't draw up to the edges of objects. When you draw through, past, and beyond, it makes your mistakes or your correct judgments more obvious, and I just think it's a better practice. I'm using what you would call a lay-in line here, which is a very light line. I don't feel nailed down to any of these. I can easily, especially with charcoal, I can take my hand and almost erase it with the side of my hand. This is a Blackwing pencil, which is one of my favorite tools that I do a lot of the drawings in the book. It's very soft, but it also holds a very sharp point. I've got a bunch of them sharpened here, so I recommend that you have a very sharp tool as you draw. Right now I'm doing kind of like what we call the ladder of the face. I'm finding the distances between the features. I've solved the overall head shape. I've solved the way the hair cuts out the head shape. I've solved the short axis. That means where the eyes rest on that axis. Then I've solved the long axis where the nose would lie. This gives me the tilt of the head again, which is very crucial because all the parts need to relate to those long and short axes. Those are our groundwork, so to speak, or framework in which we build the features into it. Eyes lie a dead center in the head for the most part, most always. Then nose is roughly halfway down from there. As you can see, I haven't drawn it a little bit of it in there. When I draw the eyes, I draw eyeballs first, right? It starts to, it's a mass conception, a simplified form representing the anatomical form we're drawing, because it starts making us think that they're a three-dimensional object. Remember, eyeballs aren't almonds or little flat shapes. They have mass, and when we draw a sphere, I think it gets the student or the artist starting to think about the three-dimension quicker. And then the lids will lay on top of that sphere. I did the sternocleidomastoid, you can see on Aaron here. That's a helpful anatomical landmark. It starts from behind the ears and ends right at the pit of the neck. Kind of like a little arrow. Anyways, it points to the center of the figure. It's crucial because, again, wherever that sternocleido hits the pit of the neck, that's going to be the center of your figure. And if you want to draw anything, if you're drawing a car or any symmetrical object, you want to find the center first, because then you can find it, use it as a reference point to where how foreshortened a form is in your relation to its relation to the viewer. So finding the center of objects is crucial. And again, these are still very light lines here. Not a lot of shading yet. I'm doing a simple schematic, almost like a blueprint for the figure now. Doing a little bit of value in that iliac crest, finding the crotch, external oblique. And now I've got the schematic, I'm going to start to refine my silhouette a little bit. So this is the 2D, the two-dimensional underpinnings of our drawing. From here, the next phase would be solving our 3D. That means the form shadows. That's where you're going to get into lighting, and that's where you're going to get into your z-axis or objects that are coming towards you in space. So, you know, before it was just lengths, widths. Now we're dealing with all those forms that are coming towards us. So we're going to be dealing with cast shadows, form shadows, which are the only two types of shadows, cast and form. Cast shadows are created by an object obfuscating or blocking the light, and form shadows are created by an object turning away from the light. Form shadows are soft in general, and cast shadows are crisp or harder. So being able to manipulate those two components of light and shade is crucial to manipulating the viewer's eye, right? Because our eye is drawn to sharp objects, and soft objects recede from the eye. So it's an important tool in mastering values, is understanding edges. When I started with Fred, he called it, I remember, like a hierarchy of edges. You have, you know, from the very sharpest edge, which is like a razor, you know, to a medium edge, which is kind of soft, to a lost edge, which is completely blown away either into the light or the shadow. I think it's important that people and students realize that, you know, with lighting, things can blow out into the light and they can go into the shadow dark. So it's crucial to understand that, and it's a great tool as an illustrator because it gives your eye a place to rest and lets other parts of your imagery take prominence. So crucial tool, I think, for the artist. Right now, again, still resolving some of the smaller forms. Again, you know, my instructors, particularly Fred, talked about keeping those big shapes at the beginning for as long as possible. I've gone into some detail and stuff a little quicker than I normally would, but if you're a beginning student particularly, keep it simple, keep it abstract. Don't get bogged down in the details. That's what's gonna really be your undoing. If you get too bogged down in the details without the underlying big shapes being accurate, it doesn't matter how well you render the lips, the nose, whatever. If it's too long, right, or if the proportions are a little off. So as long as you can stay in this mode that I'm in right now, this lay-in mode, it's the most important. If you rush to the finish, it can be really detrimental, especially even as you get more advanced. Because I can make something look three-dimensional very pretty adroitly now, but sometimes I'll just think, oh, that lay-in's good enough, or the underlying structure is pretty correct, and I'll just rush through that phase, and all of a sudden I have a drawing that is inaccurate, and I mean that in the spirit of the drawing, or the pose, the gesture, or in a likeness, especially because I was a movie poster artist for a number of years, and likeness is all about getting those big shapes accurate, not the details. My teacher Fred Fixler used to talk about yearbook photos. Not that they have maybe print yearbooks anymore, but they're very small, right? Black and white back in the day, and you could still recognize a person when their head was the size of your fingernail. Why is that? Because of the big shapes. It had nothing to do with their hair color or details. It was just the big shapes and the relation between their features and the distances. So my point being, with likeness particularly, you got to get those big shapes, distances, and their relation to each other are correct. As you can see in this stage too, I haven't done a lot of it, but I do a lot of erasing and correcting what I've done. Your eraser's just as well. There I go. Just as important of a tool as the drawing itself. So look at your drawing as you progress and see what is not supporting what you want to say about the pose, or anatomically, or gesturally, or even just artistically, and be ruthless in editing it out. Drawing's an iterative process. It's not like getting on a train and going from point A to point B. You stop along the way. You take sidetracks. You can stop, consider what you've done. So I think, especially with the beginning student, a lot of times I think it's just like, once that train's going, you got to go, and you don't. You need to sometimes stop and be analytical. It's a very analytical practice, drawing, and that's one of the things I love about it. Is especially drawing from life. You need to correct what you see, judge what you see, and they're just a series of judgments, hopefully correct, and I don't mean just anatomically, but in the spirit of the gesture, one on top of the other until you have a finished drawing. But conversely, if you rush these beginning stages, you get the angle of the figure incorrect. If you get the gesture a little too stiff, it won't improve as you add all these details. So my point being is you need to slow down and really look at what you're doing and look at the angles. If you're drawing from life, I'll use a pencil a lot of times and lay it on the model. I'll hold it up. You've all seen artists do that, and check some of the angles, especially at the beginning, because if you get off that beginning, like I said, things can get askew. Now I'm putting on a little tonal value, working in finding the bottom of that chin there, refining the big shapes of that head, getting into some of the features. Lips, nose. Lips are three parts, right? You have the two wings of the lips, and then the center part, and then on the bottom lip you have three parts also. And you can study all the features in there and their components, and it'll help you when you draw from life. You need to understand the ear and the helix and anti-helix and all those things. You should understand their basic proportions. I think it's kind of what we do as artists. understanding the component parts of what we're drawing. Anatomy is important, but I will say at the beginning, I think it's more important that you understand how to draw a proportionate figure than get up into too much anatomy too soon. I don't know a great deal of anatomy. I know enough just to be dangerous, I guess. And I have a good idea of the big shapes and the big muscles that I'm drawing. But you know, a doctor probably knows more anatomy than I do, but maybe their drawings wouldn't look as good. So just the knowledge of anatomy alone isn't going to save you. You still need to understand these big shapes and how they relate to each other. But it won't hurt either as you get more advanced. Just don't get too caught up in it because I've seen some people that know a lot of anatomy, but then the drawing itself maybe suffers because the component parts are taking on a life of their own, and I'm not seeing an overall statement, artistic statement. I'm seeing little bits and pieces of stuff. So something to think about as far as anatomy. But that being said, you should know, you know, triceps, biceps, latissimus dorsi, all those big surface forms particularly. You should have a good understanding of those as an art student. And it helps to know their names. You know, I know the big muscles because it helps you locate them and helps you memorize them. So it doesn't hurt, but I don't want to overstate the study of anatomy because like I say, I have a rudimentary understanding of it. But probably more important would be the study of bones, right? I think that's really the most important. You need to know the tibia, fibula, humerus, you know, all patella, all the major bones, and their how they operate. You know, Bridgman's great at that. If you look at his book, it really makes you understand the human being as a machine, right? So it'll help you understand how these bones form the underpinnings of the figure and how anatomy, muscles and tendons attach to those bones, and how it functions as a human machine, as it were. So I think that's very helpful, understanding the bones. And again, I'm going to talk a little bit about, you know, the C curves, straights, and S curves. So, you know, the bones are where your joints are where you're going to find your square shapes and your hard edges and your straights. That's because that's where the tendons are attaching, and we need structure there. In between, we need things to be able to move, such as your biceps, etc. So you're going to find your C curves in the middles of these forms. So those are the squishy bits, right? Those are the complex sides of the forms, and the bones are the simplified sides of the forms, as it were. So complex versus simple. So one thing I will say is I talk to my students a lot about this too. It's like you have your C curves, but they never are symmetrical, right? They're not parentheses ever on a figure. The figure is staggered, and it's important that you get the convexities and concavities not directly across from each other. You know something's probably wrong. Even on a breast, you have gravity affecting the bottom of it, and the forms of the bottom of the breast turning at a different rate of speed as you do from where they attach, where it attaches into the pectoralis. So a little bit more advanced, but being sensitive, and you'll see as I'm getting into here and drawing some of these forms, being sensitive to how fast or how slow forms turn is important. You know. I studied a lot with Muka and a lot of his academic drawings, and he's very sensitive to how quickly or how slowly a form turns, and it doesn't stay. You know, a form doesn't stay turning at the same rate of speed for very long on the figure. If you're drawing a C curve and it's turning at the same radius and it isn't changing, you know something's wrong, because the whole figure is being affected by gravity. So it's changing the rate of speed that these forms turn, especially as you can see, I'm working on the breast here. You want to be sensitive to that. And I think, if you can see, I have a little. I like positive and negative shapes quite a bit. There's a little trapped negative shape on the side of her, underneath her breast there, between her arm. I look for little stuff like that. Silhouette stuff that's interesting, that creates a nice design. getting into a little bit of the value pattern right now. So this value pattern is, again, put on top of my 2D schematic, and I'm going to basically use it as a map, a road map, and I'm going to be using the edges of the shadow. Again, we have two types of edges I'm playing with right here. I'm playing with the core shadow, which is the turning edge of the form, and I'm playing with cast shadow. And as you can see, I'm joining these shadows together because it's becoming a lost edge. And then as you can see on her, underneath her arm, you're starting to get a little bit of a cast shadow there, and then it transitions into a form shadow onto her torso. So you get that difference that I like to exacerbate between the hard and soft edges. It's really fun to be able to play with this. And again, when I'm in the shadow mapping mode here, I usually keep my shadows pretty flat in value. There's not a lot of undulations. I'm not getting really dark darks. I'm not getting reflected light, and I'm keeping them very flat. In like a 50% gray, I think is a good way to go. Then you can bump a little harder on your core. That'll pop that towards you a little bit, give you more form. Or you can pull out a little reflected light with a kneaded eraser in the shadow if you need to. But you got to be careful with all that stuff. I think it's important that your shadows and light have when you squint down, they all form a cohesive whole, and they don't mingle with each other. The biggest problem you're going to have with value, I tell my students, is confusing the light and the shadow. So we do a lot of Sharpie exercises where you have just a Sharpie, so you have to decide what's light, what's shadow, and understanding that. Fred used to say, your darkest halftone in the light is still going to be lighter than your lightest light in the dark. I know it's a lot of stuff to wrap your brain around, but the point being is that don't let your halftones in the light compete with the shadow, and don't let your half lights or reflected lights in the shadow compete with the light. When you're drawing from the figure, I guess the thing I tell my students, and what Fred really inculcated in us as students, is to squint. Because squinting changes the way you see, and it simplifies the light masses and it simplifies the dark passages. So that's a little bit of my approach to the figure. Again, this is a little quick demo, but it gives you a little taste of my process. I talk about some of these concepts in the book, so I hope you enjoy reading them, and in the interview with George Pratt. But again, I want to thank everybody for purchasing the book. It really means a lot to me, and I can't tell you how happy I am with how it came out. I think Spirit On and the team did a great job. It's really lovely. I can't wait for you guys to see it, and I appreciate you guys listening to me drone on, and hopefully this makes a little bit of sense. I know it's a lot of information, and I'm throwing a lot at you, but hopefully I'll be posting more of these online. Maybe not just online, but maybe I'll start a website or something and get more in depth with these. But anyways, I wanted to thank you guys all again, and thanks for buying Muse. And I'll be talking to you online. You can catch me on Instagram or on Facebook. Thanks again. Take care now.